This is Shenandoah, or Squishy Stitches. We are here for the first Creepy Stitchy. So, thank you for tuning in and welcome. Today we are going to discuss the Beast of Gevaudan. One thing, I'm not fluent in French. If I mispronounce things, I do apologize. Unfortunately, it is what it is. I don't speak French. I don't know the accent or the pronunciation. However, let us begin. So, the area where this happens is an area that is now known as Lozère. Back then it was called Gevaudan. It is about 340 miles south of Paris, or 547 kilometers. In 1764, which is when our story takes place, it was about a 15-day trip. The land between Gevaudan and Paris was like that of a very dark and creepy fairy tale. It was full of deep, dark forests and tall mountains and barren hills. It was a very harsh place to live, with bad soil for growing crops, and it was very sparsely populated. It is estimated it had about 15 people per square kilometer, which is about 25 per mile. That's not a lot of people. The area had been ravaged by plague, war, and parasites that destroyed crops. Poverty was big in the area. Like, not popular, but it was common. Most of the rural families were barely holding on. A day in the fields would barely bring in enough money to pay the bills and keep food on the table. And because of that, families with kids would send their kids out to work, because they needed every hand working and every dollar or whatever money they had, it was livres, coming in. Education was basically unattainable. It was extremely expensive, and as such, most families didn't have it, so people were very superstitious. The way, old thinking, old superstitions, old wives' tales, all of that were part of their lives. The age of enlightenment just hadn't reached them. Science was not known. So we're talking people who believed in witches and witchcraft and hags and fairies and all of that fun stuff. In Paris, things were very different. At least for the rich. The nobility and clergy. The clergy lived basically like nobility in those times. Depending on your faith, some still do. They lived in opulent mansions with modern education and thinking. People were starting to pay attention and believe science. Their days were filled with education. Their kids were educated and taught how to read and write and all of that. People were fascinated with telescopes and menageries of various animals, because, I don't know, private zoos. People nowadays still own tigers and chimpanzees and whatever. So it's still a fascination even now. So anyways, the attacks, those began in the summer of 1764. This was 1 year after the 7-Year War. It was a war that France lost most of its power and territory and colonies, especially in the Americas. It was hugely expensive, with over 200,000 casualties for France alone. That's a huge amount of the population. This led many people to be greatly dissatisfied with King Louis XV. The unrest was incredibly hard to quell, and it would eventually lead to the French Revolution in 1789. So that's the timing between the 7-Year War and the French Revolution. Another thing to note is wolf attacks were extremely common. Many people died in those days from wolf attacks. Historians estimate that it could be anywhere from like 2,000 to 8,000 in Europe for that time period, for about 100 years, of people killed by wolves. So we're talking about something that was extremely common, extremely normal, and expected. Still devastating, but expected. So the first attack was in the summer of 1764. Was a young woman named Marie-Jeanne Villais, who later became known as the Maid of Gevaudan, simply because she was the first attack and she survived. What happened was she was out grazing her oxen, as people did back then, because you have to feed your animals. They're your lifeblood. And she was rushed by what she described as a monstrous animal that scared off her dogs. What saved her was actually her oxen. They huddled up into a group with her in the center, and they fought off the beast. Many people just didn't believe her story at that time. They thought it was a ravenous wolf or a rabid wolf, and that she was just hysterical and freaked out by the attack, which, understandably so. But it wasn't very long until more attacks came. The first fatal attack was a 14-year-old Jeanne Boulet from the village of Hubax. It was the first attack accredited to the beast. It might not have been the first one, but it's the first on record. The official record simply said, on 1st July 1764, Jeanne Boulet was buried without final sacraments, having been killed by the beast. Those present, Joseph Viguer and Jean Robel. I find it particularly interesting to note that it says by the beast. If it was a wolf attack, don't you think it would say a wolf attack or whatever? But it says by the beast. It just strikes me as an odd phrasing of. Anyways, less than a week later, the beast claimed its second victim. In the early evening, 3 woodsmen were out doing what woodsmen do, and across the way on a hill they noticed a flock of sheep fleeing, like running panicked away from something. They decided they were going to go check it out, see what was going on. And they came upon the body of another young woman who had been torn apart by an animal. One thing they noticed were large fang marks, like 2 teeth, in all over her body, lots of bites. And there were an additional couple of attacks, but there wasn't a whole lot of information on those two. And this was all early July. And then things remained quiet for a couple weeks, and so people were beginning to calm down, because the 4 attacks in a short amount of time, people were kind of freaked, as we would be. But things went quiet for a little while, and they stayed quiet until August 25th, when a 15-year-old boy was killed, followed a week later by another boy of the same age, 15 years old, on September 1st. The boys weren't listed by name in the death or in the official reports, but there were death records listing their age, their gender, and those were kept at their local parishes. September 1764 proved to be a very active time for the beast. It wreaked havoc on the region. September 6th, it attacked Marian Hebrand, a 36-year-old woman, at the very edge of her village. Like, right where the houses begin. She was buried the next day, and her death certificate listed her cause of death as strangulated and devoured. Her village was close enough to one of the larger towns in the vicinity, and her death is what triggered the news to spread throughout the region and force authorities to react. Because, somebody being killed right outside the village, that's pretty freaky. I'm using that word a lot today, freaky. Word of the day. Okay. So the main person in the local government we're going to discuss is a man named Etienne Lafont. He was a regional governmental delegate, and he met with a local gamekeeper to arrange for the animal to be hunted as soon as possible. A bounty of 200 livres was also put out for anyone who could return the body of the beast to Mende. That's a city. It was also suggested that all peasants be allowed to carry firearms in order to down the monster. This is highly unusual and unprecedented, as firearms previous to this point were only for the nobility. It basically gives the feeling the region was experiencing that they would change laws so that regular people could have firearms. They had to be pretty freaked out to take that privilege away from just nobles. The area, as I said before, is an area well used to wolf attacks, so it also kind of gives you a scope of how things are feeling and the way people are reacting. Because if you're used to something and something happens, you're going to be like, oh, whatever. If something unusual happens, you are going to be like, oh my gosh. And people were panicking. That's basically it. Lafont organized with local authorities to organize ongoing hunts of about 12 people per hunt. They offered to pay 20 sous a day, which was less than a person would make farming their fields or baking their bread or whatever they did. Less than a day's wages. So, obviously, not many people showed up, because who's gonna show up for less money? Especially when you're barely making it. The men who did volunteer to hunt the beast were not experienced hunters. They did not know how to track. They didn't know how to hunt. They were not experienced in tracking or stalking their prey. They were more like clumsy campers tromping around in the woods. More like the hobbits than Aragorn the Ranger in Lord of the Rings. Also, they were not used to firearms. They'd never shot them. They'd never owned them. So, I imagine they'd have about as good of aim as a stormtrooper. Especially considering guns of that age, aim was not what it is now. The way guns were made back then, the bullets didn't always shoot straight. My dad's a gunsmith, so I know a little bit about that. Now there's sort of a spiral inside the barrel. You don't really see it, but that's what helps keep the bullet go straight, as well as the shape of the bullet. Back then it was just this little round ball down a straight tube. It would shoot kind of straight, but it's not like you'd be hitting a nickel on a target like you could now, if you practice. There's all these unexperienced people wandering the woods with firearms, making a lot of noise. Basically, everything that would make an unsuccessful hunt. Eventually, Lafayette began trying to get professional soldiers to back up the locals, because they'd be more experienced. By the end of that September, there had been another 3 attacks officially documented. However, there is a priest from Luke who wrote of continuous daily attacks. So we're talking attacks that happen daily or near daily. One of the victims, Claude Morans, was recorded by the priest in these words. An unnatural death, strangled by ferocious beast without receiving any of the sacraments, having not yet made his first communion. Aged about 12 years old, and was buried in the cemetery of our church. And were present Etienne Sapin and Jean Manor from St. Flour. So again, it just speaks to how odd these attacks were. How not like a normal attack from a wolf would be. On the 21st of September of that year, a local shepherd killed a wolf and presented it to the parish, receiving 18 livres for his trouble. But the parish doubted it was the beast. They wanted to see if the attacks would stop, despite them saying, yes, this wolf has some of the markings that have been described on the beast, which we will get into in just a moment. However, the attacks began again. A week later, on September 28th, it attacked a young girl named Magdalene Morris, just 50 feet from her front door. 50 feet. That's, playing in the yard. The attack was so vicious that her body was unrecognizable. And it was witnessed by her mother and younger brother, who were in the house and unable to help, as their family member was savaged. When they laid her to rest the next day, all they had left was one arm. That's it. Can you imagine being the mother and seeing that happen to your child in your front yard, where you had sent the child out just to play, be a kid, have fun, and then only having an arm to bury? This is the point where the local stories began calling it the Beast. So that's the mark of the beginning, I guess. Well, it's not the beginning. It's more of where it begins to take more of a supernatural tinge in people's mind as this vicious beast that they can't describe. So in October, there were 5 more attacks. 3 were luckily not fatal. The first boy was badly wounded. His scalp was ripped to his head and from his head, and he bore many, many deep slashes across his chest. And while he survived, it doesn't sound like he was ever normal again. It sounds like there may have been some brain damage. As according to the reports, he was left an idiot for some time, which back then that meant just not altogether there mentally. The second survivor was a young boy who escaped with only a few deep gashes on his cheek as his oxen again fended off the beast. I guess if you live in that area, oxen are the animal to have. The third survivor was a girl who was 10 years old. She was fortunate enough to have been noticed by 3 men in the woods who were hunting the beast, and they came upon it as it was crawling on its stomach, ready to attack her. They chased it off and managed to thwart it, despite it circling back around, away from the hunters, back to the girl to try and get her a second time. She survived both attacks. Lucky girl. The most notable and dramatic of survival stories comes from October 12th, when a young animal sprung out at 3 children. A girl who was 10, her 2 brothers, who were 13 and 6, had been out tending the family's cattle. The boys carried spears, so they were knives attached to long sticks, which they used to stab at the beast until it decided it was not worth the effort and left. And so the girl was only scratched. Give me 1 second. Alright, and as stories of the beast spread, fear conquered the countryside. The people were scared of the woods and were unwilling to leave their houses and farms without armed escorts. In a region where the economy literally depended on people working outdoors, this was devastating economically. Things just got harder for them as the price of goods got more expensive because the people were not going out and working. Previous bad harvests and then this was making grains very scarce. So the saving grace were the regular hunts, which began herding the beast northwards towards Maine. I do not know how to say it. Is it mend? Is it mend? Is it mend? I don't know. We'll go with mend. If I'm wrong, please correct me in the comments, but don't send hate because I don't speak French. I learned German. Anyways, an account from the time, who was retold by Abbot Pierre Porcher, who was very dedicated in documenting the beast. He is where most of the information I got came from. Recounted a story from his great-grandfather. So he documented all this many years later. So what he wrote down was, Jean-Pierre, the father of my grandfather, born at the Baroque de la Croix de Chevreuse, married to Julien's, had been working bundling sheaves of hay all day in the barn just beyond the village. At the end of the day, after the workers returned home for supper, Jean-Pierre arranged to straw at the end of the barn. It was not yet night, and the snow was covering all the ground. As he approached the little window, he saw something following the path to the water fountain. A sort of fright seized him as he dove to the ground quickly. Taking his rifle, he shuffled to the window of the stable that faced opposite the fountain. As he looked out the window, he spotted a beast that he did not know. "It's the beast! It's the beast!" he yelled. Although he was a very strong and steadfast man, fear had seized him to the point that he could scarcely hold his rifle. He made the sign of the cross across his chest and shot at the animal. The beast fell, only to get up, shake, and continue to move. She looked furiously around her. My grandfather fired a second shot, and once again she fell, shrieking wildly. Once again she gets up, shakes herself, and leaves, making a noise like that of a person screaming as they walk away from an argument. He told my grandfather the following: "If we do not take the means of obtaining from God and the Blessed Virgin our deliverance, it will devour us all, and that we will be continually useless." This account is the first time guns were mentioned as being completely useless against the beast. A theme that would become more and more prevalent as fear spread. The beast was attributed with more and more supernatural powers. Another story from this very bloody October tells how the beast decapitated its victim. This was the first time it was noted, but this would also become a recurrent theme, as it would, in total, behead 16 of its victims. In fact, most reports say that the beast first targeted mainly the heads and necks of victims, and then it would eat the organs. By mid-October, Lafont pleaded to the authorities to deal with the situation, and finally was successful, and local enforcements were bolstered by Captain Duhamel of the Dragoon Corps, which that was basically their cavalry. On November 5th, Duhamel arrived in St. Chili with 56 troops, 17 of which were on horseback. You would think the arrival of the guards would calm things down, but really all it did was exacerbate an already tense situation. The people did not trust the authorities. Which again, this is just like 25 years before the French Revolution, and feelings like that take a while to build up, so we're seeing the beginning of that. Now, there was an official response, so many stories springing up in daily newspapers began showing up. On the 16th of November, a story of the beast was published with an illustration of the beast. This illustration was in the Courrier d'Avignon. I believe that's how it's said. I believe that might actually also be the region that Joan of Arc was from. I could be wrong. I didn't look into that. What it said was the figure of the fierce and extraordinary beast which devours girls in the province of Gevaudan, which escapes with so much speed in very short time that it is seen 2 or 3 leagues distant and cannot be caught or killed. A wild beast has appeared for these past 2 months in this province, in the neighborhood of Langong, which is a city, and the forest of Mercou, which occasions a great consternation. It has already devoured 20 persons, chiefly children, and particularly young girls, and scarcely a day passes without some accident. The terror it occasions prevents the woodcutters from going to work in the forests, so the wood is only becoming very scarce and dear. 'Tis only within this week past that anybody could get a good view of this formidable animal. He is much higher than a wolf, low before, and his feet are armed with talons. His hair is reddish, his head large, long made, and the muzzle shaped like that of a greyhound. His ears small and straight, his breast is wide and of a grey color. His back streaked with black, and his mouth, which is large, is provided with a set of teeth so sharp that they have taken off several heads as clean as a razor could have done. He is of amazing swiftness, but when he aims his prey he crouches so close to the ground that he hardly appears bigger than a large fox, and in the distance of 1 or 2 meters he rises up on his hind legs and springs up on his prey, which he always squeezes by the neck or throat. He is afraid of oxen, which he runs away from. The consternation is universal throughout the district, and the public prayers are offered upon this occasion. The Marquis de Meringis has sent out 400 peasants to hunt this ferocious beast, but they have so far been unsuccessful. As you can see, the sketch is very crude. Its back legs appear longer than its front, and the ears are depicted as horns, as if it had sprung from the depths of hell itself. It boasts a jaw almost the full length of its head with very sharp teeth. This early description of the beast is consistent with later descriptions. Some descriptions were rather vague and made it unclear exactly what the beast looked like. The dragoons, who were brave men used to fear and stress and all of that, they described it as a very large, very hairy dog. It was said to be a brownish to reddish color with a belly of light yellow. The head was very long, and it had long canine teeth. The ears were short and stood up straight on the head. The tail was long and thin, but bushy at the end. And it would stick up when it was running. The legs were very long and had sharp claws. They said it resembled a bear or a boar, but wasn't either. Some reports described it as having a pig-like snout as well. And then Duhamel, the leader of the dragoons, he once described the beast as looking as if its mother was a lion and the father was some creature unknown. And then within the populace, the reports that contained witness testimony and oral traditions were not terribly consistent, but they did follow a pattern. But the reports not being terribly consistent isn't unusual for high-stress situations. 20 people can see a robbery, and every single one of those 20 people would describe the perpetrator differently. That's a well-known fact. But the description did tend to fluctuate until it eventually settled on an overall description, that it had unique powers that could be seen as demonic or supernatural. It was said to have a pig-like snout, like I had earlier said, retractable claws, cloven feet, horns, spots, unnatural strength and speed, a stripe down its back, a black stripe down the back, and an unnatural stench. It stunk up to high heaven. One reported attack, the beast attacked a carriage, but upon realizing it was outnumbered by an approaching soldiers, it escaped by jumping through the carriage, in one window, out the other, breaking the glass on each side. It was reported that the stink or the stench was so bad the carriage was burnt. Like, there was no salvaging this, even though it had only been in there for a couple seconds. The beast was also said to have glowing eyes and the ability to dispel men and freeze them in their place. They compared the beast with wolves, panthers, hyenas, lion, lynx, bears, and any combination of those species. Because this was, the superstitious times where hybrids and chimeras were thought to exist. That leads us to the winter of 1764, which was a very harsh winter, and by the new year, the beast had attacked 27 people and killed 18. In December, the situation between Duhamel and the residents had reached a peak, and Duhamel was fired. However, Lafont got him reinstated. In January 12th, a boy named Jacques Portefeuille and 7 of his friends were attacked by the beast. After several attacks by the beast, they managed to chase it off by sticking close together. Jacques was the leader of the group and kept them together, and this attack, drew the interest of the king. He had heard the story. He was impressed. He was so impressed, in fact, that he awarded 300 livres to Portefeuille and had him educated at the crown's expense in Paris. The rest of the group was awarded 350 livres to be split among the rest of the 6 boys. And if I remember correctly, 350, that's about a year's wages, I believe. It could be more. I could be wrong. It's very hard to translate ancient money into modern denominations. So after that attack, 3 weeks later, the king sent an acclaimed wolf hunter, Jean-Charles Marc Anthony Vermels d'Enval, and his son Jean-Francois, and they came from Normandy, which is the area of France closest to England, I believe. It was reported that Jean-Charles had killed 1,200 wolves in his lifetime, and was an undisputed expert at the hunting of wolves. He told the king that he could dispatch this beast in no time. He was wrong. He was very wrong. So the king ordered peasants to join the hunts with Duhamel. Previous hunts had been voluntary, but now they were conscripted. Anyone who disobeyed this command would be brought up on criminal charges. At the same time, they were reminded that they were only allowed to kill wolves and the beast. Hunting game was still a privilege held only for the nobility. I'm sorry if you heard that. My cat's going nuts. She's playing. However, any peasant who caught the beast would be awarded 6,000 livres, which would amount to winning the lottery. It was almost a lifetime of wages for a poor farmer. The winter dragged on, as winter does, and the beast was extraordinarily ravenous. Sometimes I can't speak. By the time the snow and ice had melted in the spring, the official reports tallied 56 casualties. 56. That's a lot. Because of its success at hunting, the stories continued to evolve and become more and more extreme. By 1765, it was said the beast could walk on 2 legs. It could cast spells and curses, and had befriended a local witch. Many child victims were attributed to local werewolf folklore. So people did think about werewolves. They did think this might be a werewolf. The stories were predictably discounted by Paris and the northern cities because they were far more educated and sophisticated. But the hunter was not successful. So him and his son spent 6 months stalking the beast with his son and bloodhounds with no success. The beast still killed often. It still hunted. And it didn't take long for King Louis to become tired of the lack of success and dismiss him from the region. A lot of this is because newspapers were reporting this, and 4 newspapers were picking up on this and making fun of him as an ineffective ruler because he couldn't get the situation under control. King Louis then sent his personal gun bearer, Francois Antony, to lead the hunts. Francois attempted to poison the beast. He used tainted carcasses of 310 dogs over the next 82 days in order to try and poison the beast. And again, this was with continuous hunting. And both of those tactics were still unsuccessful. And the beast's death toll was now 71. So this is a very vicious beast. From June through September of 1765, Antony killed 3 large wolves, the largest of which was of remarkable size. His official statement was, "We declare by the present report, signed by my hand, we never saw a wolf that compared to this one," which is why we estimate this could be the ferocious beast that caused so much damage. Several victims did verify that this was the beast that had attacked them. Antony had the animal stuffed, and it was sent off to Versailles. The official reports credited the wolf with many unusual characteristics. The surgeons who dissected the wild beast of the Gevaudan, killed by M. Antony on the 20th Alt, not sure what month that is, say that this is more of a hyena than a wolf. As soon as it was killed, it sent forth a very disagreeable stench. In his body, several bones of sheep were found. This animal hath 40 teeth, but wolf's 26. The muscles of his neck were very strong. His sides are so formed that he could bend his head to his tail. His eyes sparkled with fire, that it was hardly possible to bear his look. And his tail is very large, broad, thick, and bristled with black hair. The feet are armed with claws extremely sharp and singular. That's the official report of this wolf that he had caught. While the king and press were satisfied that the beast was killed, the locals were very skeptical. The animal that was killed was not the one known to have been the beast, and the official descriptions did not match what they knew the beast to look like. And the attacks were still happening with no respite, no break. And in 1766, it claimed an additional 20 victims and had attacked another 18 that were unsuccessful. Calls for aid to the king were completely unsuccessful, as he had written it off. His gunman, Francois Antony, had caught the beast. And the press also remained silent, as the official report said the beast was dead. In the summer of 1767, the locals joined forces with a local man by the name of Jean Chastel. Jean stalked the beast with bullets made of silver, blessed by a local priest. Reportedly, Chastel had come across the beast north of Mende, where it had been approaching him. Chastel calmly said his prayers, put his prayer book in his pocket, took off his glasses, put them in the pocket, aimed his gun, and killed the beast with a single silver bullet. He brought in the beast to be examined by the locals, who said it matched. It was an animal the size of a calf or donkey. It had reddish fur on its back, and a black bar from its shoulders to its tail. The head enormous and similar to that of a pig. The mouth always open, the eyes sparkling. The ears short and straight like horns. The breast very white and very big. Hind legs very big and very long, and the front legs shorter and covered in fur. 6 claws on each paw, and the back legs had hooves, like those of a horse. I'm sure that's just mixing satanic devil, blah, blah, blah. Inside the stomach of this animal, there was the arm of a young girl, which confirmed to Chastel and the locals that this was actually the beast. The total tally for the beast was it had sprung 240 attacks, killing 112 and wounding 53 others. The body was paraded around the region before it was sent to Versailles. However, it was August, it was very hot, and the 15-day journey meant that the body arrived in very poor condition. It was rotting. And so it was buried immediately. It was not examined. The king did not reward Chastel in any way. So that's the story of the beast. The theories around it range from a wolf, a hyena, a lion, a werewolf. In fact, this is the story where the idea that a werewolf can only be killed by a silver bullet stems. That's the beginning of that part of the werewolf legends. So, what was the beast? Was it some sort of wolf of huge size? Some sort of animal hybrid? Was it a werewolf? Did Antony kill the beast? Or did Chastel? If Chastel did not, why did the attacks stop? Maybe the locals just accepted that they had, and anything after were labeled as mere wolf attacks? Let me know what you think. Anyways, let's look at some theories. Many of the modern theories say it was just bears or wolves. And this is very probable. There are many packs of wolves and targeting easy prey in the forest. And they did roam many kilometers. It doesn't necessarily report with witness reports. For one thing, not one witness said it was a wolf. Not one. In an area that knew what wolves looked like, not one said it was a wolf. To me, that tells me it wasn't a wolf. They also did not say it was a bear, and they knew what bears looked like. The manner of the attacks, which was strangulation and attacking the head and neck of the people, isn't really indicative of a bear or a wolf attack either. Wolves go for the throat, but they don't spend time to asphyxiate their prey. They go to rip it out and then they eat. Bears, they just basically maul the victims. Which, that would account for the bodies being torn apart so much. But that they don't strangulate. So I personally don't think it was either. Was the beast a hyena? Well, parts of the description do match spotted hyenas. Spotted, tall, huge jaws. The snout could be described as pig-like. The ears are upright, and the back legs do look longer than the front. They are powerful predators that do maul their prey, and they definitely do consider humans to be prey. Antony did bring in a spotted teeth with 40. Hyenas can have up to 60. However, unlike the official French report, I looked into this, wolves actually have 42. But, so not the 26th report said. Was it a lion? Many modern theories say that it could be a sub-adult male lion. Locals were familiar with fully maned adult male lions. They are large, tawny brown. The young are spotted, and they do have a blackish stripe that run down the back, which many testimonies did say this beast had. It also had the bushy tail, a pale belly, and retractable claws, which some of the legends did say they had. They can leap long distances and run very fast at 50 miles per hour or 80 kilometers per hour and leap 36 feet forward. So bigger than an orca whale. They can jump that far. And they can also jump 12 feet into the air. This would certainly seem supernatural to me if I didn't know this about lions. The other thing that kind of struck me is the beast is often described as skulking forward on its bellies before leaping to attack claws first. Lions also do strangle their victims to death. So to me that sounds like it's very likely a lion. That's the one I subscribe to personally, is that the beast is a lion because of the way it's described to attack and how it looks. Other theories are that John Chastel was responsible for the killings with a trained animal. He owned many exotic animals and he bred them for hunting. It's said that he may have armored the beast with armor hide, and that may be the reason why it was seen as bulletproof. It does seem rather suspicious that upon seeing the beast, he calmly said a prayer and put his glasses and all of that in his pocket. Would a ferocious beast just let him do that? Furthermore, Antony had Chastel imprisoned for a time during his attempts of hunting the beast. While Chastel had been locked up, the attacks did stop. They did stop. Those are the main theories. Another one that's possible is serial killer who raped and mutilated women and children. And the people used the beast to cover the actions. But if that's the case, why did he stop? Anyway, that's basically all I have on the Beast of Gevaudan. Let me know which theory you like. And if you like this story, subscribe, tell me what you think. And have a great day. Thank you very much.